Welcome to Sports Connections with David Smale, a podcast that brings fun and interesting connections throughout sports. As an author and sports journalist, David has been interviewing fascinating people in sports for more than 40 years. Now here's your host, David Smale.
How do you define success? Is it being right most of the time? If you're in a competitive sport, do you consider winning more often than you lose as being a success? How about winning more than 90% of your games? I know that's not possible, right? Let me introduce you to Anson Dorrance, the women's soccer coach at the University of North Carolina. He's won nearly 91% of his games over a 40-year career or close to 40-year career, something the credible source Wikipedia calls one of the most successful coaching record in the history of athletics. Anson has won 2/3 of the NCAA championships ever contested in women's soccer. He coached the U.S. women's national team to victory in the first Women's World Cup. He perennially turns out national players of the year as well as future coaches who litter the college soccer landscape. And he does it all with a calm demeanor that would make Alfred E. Neuman jealous. And if you don't know who Alfred E. Neuman is, Google it. Nothing could be finer for us today than to have Anson Dorrance join us. Anson, welcome to Sports Connections.
Dave, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you.
Let's start with your own personal playing career. I know you lived around the world. Your dad was an oil executive, and so you learned to play the sport from people who don't look at it as a third sport or a fourth sport or a fifth sport. It was the sport. So you learned to play in some really exciting places. Just talk about your personal playing career.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was raised abroad, and I'd love to pretend that that's where I learned how to play. And actually, for years, I was so ashamed of my my lack of real pedigree in the game that I used this, foreign background as a prop for where I was in the game. And then we were in Haiti, and we were in a press conference, and this is the qualification for the first Women's World Cup in 1991. And honestly, the team that I was coaching, the U.S. Women's National Team, and our first effort to qualify for the first official World Cup, it was done in Haiti. And we had qualified, and we had outscored our opponents, our 5 opponents, by a margin of 49-0. And I was on top of the world. I was so proud of my team, so proud of how well they played. And actually, everyone in the room was shocked. I mean, they were absolutely shocked because, of course, the United States certainly back then had no reputation in the game. They had no reputation on the men's side of the game. The women's game was just emerging. So Their assumption was, without a real men's tradition, these women certainly weren't going to be able to play. And then for them, watching us march through this qualifying tournament was jaw-dropping. So one reporter after the other in front of me is asking me, well, what did you guys do in practice? And I shared it with them. And, well, were your players raised in foreign countries? I said, no, we got most of them from the American colleges. Were they coached by foreign coaches when they were younger? I said, no. Most of the youth coaches, were basically either, maybe some expat Brits, but we got it from the American collegiate population mostly. And they were just stunned. And finally, someone in the room said, well, Coach, what's your background? And I said, well, I was born in Bombay, India. And at the age of 3, my family moved to Calcutta. And then from there, we moved to Nairobi, Kenya. And from Nairobi, we spent 3 years in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. From there, we went to Singapore, Malaysia. From there, after a short stint in the United States, we spent some time in Brussels, Belgium. And while I was there, my parents sent me to a Swiss boarding school. And now for the first time, all these reporters were writing something down. Because, of course, they couldn't believe that, this was an American team. This had to have some kind of major foreign influence. And you know how reporters ask questions. They were asking questions to write the story they had already written in their minds. And they just wanted some language to support the story they were already writing. And so the story they were already written was, this was clearly a team influenced by the rest of the world. It wasn't a team that has any way related to the United States. And then all of a sudden, because we played so well, I told everyone the truth. I said, but I learned how to play soccer at the University of North Carolina, and I learned how to coach it at U.S. Soccer Coaching Schools and at the NSCAA convention in the United States. And, later that year when we won the world championship, I was so excited to go around the country saying, I was proud to be an American, proud to be a product of our coaching system, and proud to be a world champion. So for me, I was born and raised overseas. But here's what's interesting, Dave, and you'll understand this completely. When you're an American raised abroad, you spend your life trying to become an American. So what sports did I play when I was living in all these places? I tried to play American sports because I wanted to be more American. And so, I played a little soccer when I was in Addis Ababa, but it was, I wasn't very good at it. I played a little bit in Singapore because my PE instructor loved soccer, and he was from what used to be called Ceylon or Sri Lanka. And so obviously that's a country where soccer is very popular. But and I played a little bit at my boys' boarding school in Freiburg, Switzerland, at La Ville Saint-Jean. But it was a sport we played in between, playing basketball, going skiing every Monday. And of course, we shifted our school week. So we skied on Monday, went to school Saturday, obviously took Sunday off since it was run by a Marianist teaching order. But basically, I played a lot of sports at this preppy boarding school, and soccer was just one of them. So I was incredibly proud to tell the group sitting in front of me in Haiti that, I learned how to play soccer in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I learned how to coach it from my instructors in the U.S. Soccer Coaching Schools, and also from listening to all these wonderful clinicians at the NSCAA conventions every single year. So that was my route into the game.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Your first head coaching position was with the North Carolina men's team, and then you added the women's team. Talk about when it came time for you to choose between coaching one or the other, and why did you choose the women's team?
Well, the only reason I got the job as the men's coach at North Carolina is because the guy I played for at UNC, Dr. Marvin Allen, was retiring. My coaching resume in preparation for ascending to that extraordinary coaching position at such an amazing school with such an incredible athletic tradition in all sports was the fact he liked me. And he was stepping back. He went in and shared with the athletic director, Mr. Kobe, I'm stepping down in a year or two, and the individual that I think would do a wonderful job replacing me is Anson Dorrance. Do you have any issue considering him? And then all of a sudden I got a phone call. Bill Kobe, the athletic director at UNC, calls me into his office to basically talk to me about the vacancy that was about to occur with, Dr. Marvin Allen stepping back, and he offered me the position, and my jaw dropped. I mean, I went from coaching in the Rainbow Soccer League, a co-educational recreational soccer league in Chapel Hill. I went from there to the top of Division I. No one does that.
No.
No one goes from rec ball, co-educational rec ball. You're coaching elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school kids. You're coaching this team you're playing on, which is for the adults, where at the beginning of every game, I would try to juggle the ball in the air, have it not touch the ground, and score it. And that's the way I tried to start every single game in the adult league, because that was so much superior a player to everyone I was playing against in that senior league. So this is the league I was coaching in, and then I go ascend to this opportunity at the top of Division I. It was just extraordinary. But the AD had no issue with it, and I think one reason he was probably trying to save his budget. Back in those days, University of North Carolina didn't really have much of a budget for its sports teams. And certainly the guy I played for, Dr. Marvin Allen, was a full-time physical education instructor at the University of North Carolina. And so he was a part-time soccer coach. I think the last thing my athletic director wanted to do, looking at his budget, was to bring in some full-timer that had a glorious reputation that would obviously require an enormous salary. So he brought me in for the extraordinary fee of $2,500 a year. So I think that was packed very nicely into his budget. So maybe that was the motivation. And yeah, I'll follow Marvin's advice and hire Anson. And holy cow, does this, save me an opportunity to spend less money than I would have to if I, did a national search. And so I ended up in this extraordinary position. I spent a year as his head coach designate, and that was 1976. And then from 77 forward, I was the head men's coach. And then all of a sudden, while I'm doing a law degree, Bill Kobe walks up to me again and says, Anson, are you free this afternoon? I said, sure, what's going on? He says, well, the women's club has petitioned for varsity status. The women's club soccer team has petitioned for varsity status. I want you to give me a reckoning on their level and what you think their potential is. And so I go out to the field, I'm watching these wonderful pioneer women play the game. And I'm looking at them saying, you know what, Mr. Kobe, they're pretty good. They're clearly well organized. And so I'm making a pitch for their coach. I think that'd be wonderful if you would adopt them as a women's soccer varsity. And then his next line is, well, Anson, if you will agree to coach both teams, I will make your part-time men's position with the women full-time. So I said, absolutely. I was, trying to help my wife pay my way through law school. She was the primary breadwinner. And by the way, even after I was given the full-time coaching position, coaching the men and women, she still made a lot more money than I did. In fact, I think it took me 10 or 15 years to catch her. And trust me, I am so competitive. Yes, when I went into that accountant, I wanted to see that I was closing the gap. And she was such a successful breadwinner. It took me a while to catch her. She had finished a wonderful professional dance career and was now teaching dance locally in Chapel Hill. And so now I was the full-time men and women's soccer coach at North Carolina. And then honestly, you asked, how I ended up selecting the women. Well, back then I was pioneering a new sport. And all of a sudden, because these women gave me a chance to work full-time, I didn't condescend in coaching them. I didn't, spend less time with them. I didn't have any less ambitions for them. Just like with the men, I tried to win every game I was coaching. And I, spent just as much time recruiting for that women's team as I did for the men. And then obviously because of that, I think very few women's coaches back then were taking it as seriously as I was, because it was a new sport. And obviously because of my coaching connections across the country from coaching the men, I was sort of already integrated into the women's game. We were also the first women's varsity in the South. So I had a chance to recruit my region as the only varsity in the entire South. Most of the teams back in those days for the women were in New England. I think Brown was the first women's varsity, and then all the other New England schools around them started to pop up. So I think this gave me a recruiting advantage for all the great athletes in the South. And so I used that to sort of jump on it. We had some early success, and I could sense that I had a chance to guide my own sport, which is very rare. And so for years, it was just overwhelming for me to try to coach both, certainly with my competitors coaching just one team. And I know that damaged me in recruiting when a male coach could say, you know what, he's got, this women's team as well. He's not going to spend all of his time worried about you and coaching you guys. And so I wasn't getting as much of the cream of the crop I think I could have gotten had I been a coach for just one team. So I lobbied to John Swafford, the former ACC commissioner, who has stepped back as of basically this last week. He was my athletic director at UNC when I was trying to split the program into two. And then I conspired with my assistant men's coach, a wonderful man by the name of Elmar Bolovich. And I said, well, Elmar, I think we can convince John to split the program. If you will agree with me right now to cut the budget in half, you take half for the men, I take half for the women. It wasn't like this was an enormous budget. It wasn't.
Yeah.
But then all that would happen is your title would change, but your income wouldn't. Because I think if we went in there with demands of, paying larger salaries and having enormous budgets, it'll never go through. And Elmar didn't have a problem with that. So we went into John Swafford, we made the pitch. And of course, I had this chance to, pioneer a sport, and not just pioneer it at the collegiate level. I had a chance to pioneer it, period, in all kinds of ways. And so it was a chance for me to do something that I think very few of us have an opportunity to do. And I jumped on it. Elmar had no trouble. He did a great job with the men. And now I just had the women. And obviously, the rest is history.
I've talked in the past about the difference in coaching men and women. If I'll give you 3 minutes, that's not fair, I know. I'll give you 3 minutes to talk about the difference between coaching men and coaching women. And if people say, "Oh, it's no different, they're athletes," they don't understand. There are differences. So just talk, and I'll let you go over, but as briefly as you can, talk about the difference in coaching men and coaching women.
Yeah, well, thank you, Dave, because obviously radical feminism would like us to pretend there are no differences between men and women, only environmental influences that pushed us in different directions. But basically, obviously, I had a women's team. And what was really cool about the feminist literature back when I was in school, it was telling me, Anson, there are no differences between men and women, so treat your men and women exactly the same. And I tried this. I tried to treat the two teams the same. The men trained from 2 to 4, women 4 to 6. And I more or less brought a similar training platform in for both teams, but they were different. It was clear to me they were different. And obviously, I had to change if I wanted to be effective with the women. So I did make some differences in the way I approached them both. Men sort of came into the environment that I was coaching with a lot more competitive fire than the women did. I thought a lot of what I had to do was to get them to embrace competition, because I think sociologically the way we raise our young girls and women is we teach them that it's more important to, please everyone around them and to genuflect and to be non-confrontational. And if you look at the games that these young girls are brought up playing, they're basically turn-taking games. Jacks, you try to go through and pick up all the jacks while your opponent is watching and not interfering, and then they go and you don't interfere. Hopscotch, they go while you don't interfere with them. You're not trying to trip them as they go through the pattern. Yeah. And then you go and they don't try to trip you. And their games are non-confrontational. Even though they're competitive to some extent, it's not the same sort of confrontation and competitiveness that a young boy is raised with. And young boys spend half their time in their games as they're young, arguing over the rules and debating whether or not they were touched in touch football, and claiming they were fouled when they were driving to the basket in basketball. And we're just brought up in this confrontational environment. And then if we're very competitive, we're lauded, we're put on pedestals, and this is who we are. And of course, our images of the great men are all alphas who are very competitive. And of course, we're all praised for this. And this isn't the way the girls are raised. And so all of a sudden, they're in this environment, and I can see there's a disconnect. And even though I've got a lot of extraordinary women athletes, I just can't create the same sort of competitive fire. And then I can sense as well that there are other issues going on, and I can't really spot them because I have no experience coaching women. I went to a boys' boarding school for my high school education. In those days, the closest I came to a woman is when I had the leading female role in the school play my senior year. So that was my experience with women, coming out of high school. So now all of a sudden I'm surrounded by them, and I don't know how to coach them. I don't know how to relate to them. I don't know how to motivate them. I don't know anything about them. For me, they're strange creatures, and they're completely different. And all this, radical feminist tripe I was delivered, as a student at UNC is just cracking under the reality of the real world, because we are different. And they can debate me until they're blue in the face, but if they came into both environments, they would see that men and women are different. And so, I had to make some changes. And honestly, I love the concessions. They wanted to be related to. They wanted me to connect with them. And even though, yes, you're trying to connect with them through the sport you mutually love, they'd rather have a more personal connection, that you like them for reasons beyond the game. Not that you like them because they're scoring, 20 goals for you a season. They want to know that you respect them as human beings, and they have a lot greater demand on the standards they set for your support and respect of them than smashing the ball in the back of the net. The men in general, even though I did get close to some of them, they love the fact that I respected their athletic platforms and coached them through that conduit. And so there were all these little differences that made a huge difference as my evolution and training and developing women changed. And even though, honestly, what I eventually understood, the more sophisticated I became as a collegiate soccer coach, is you're not really coaching the game, you're coaching human beings. The game is something you're connecting with them through.
Right.
But honestly, you're coaching human beings. And from that perspective, your humanism, your human qualities, I think still have to be a measure of your leadership in both genders. But there are many differences, and I'm just so sorry that we make this gender divide such an interesting one when we talk about gender politics. The only thing that's protected me, honestly, even though I've held this opinion forever, was my success. And also the women that played for me knew I cared about them and knew that I was trying to take them to their promised land, not just in the game they were playing, but also as human beings. So to some extent, despite the fact that, I don't check every box in Mary Daly's, gynecology, I'm more in the lines of, a less radical feminist, but I am a feminist nonetheless, because I genuinely believe in the evolution of our sport and the success these women have had in taking our game to a completely different level, and certainly where the United States is in the world, and not just in the game itself, but in the social justice positions, which I have huge admiration for. And the fact that we are a world leader in our game. And a part of it is we've embraced competition. And I think some of the other cultures that I guess had a more traditional route into the evolution of their women were a little slower to get to where we were, partially because I embraced that certain things had to be trained more aggressively in women than in men, because men came to the environment with this competitive fire burning at a more aggressive rate than the women did when they came in. So I think I made adjustments that I think helped our culture in a very positive way.
All right. 3 minutes and 2 seconds. Very good. Actually, probably a little more than that, but thank you for summarizing that very, very well. You have been phenomenally successful. We talked about your record. Here are the statistics: 809 wins, 67 defeats, and 36 ties, 907 winning percentage. You're a 7-time National Coach of the Year. You've never had a losing season, and you've had 5 perfect seasons. Anson, everyone has bad days or bad years. Why are you the exception?
Well, honestly, if anyone's successful collegiately, the reasons are basically effective recruiting. And we've always been in a position to attract wonderful players. And so every single season that had any kind of success, it's built on the players you've recruited. Now, the advantage that I think we took was when we jumped in early. Again, we were very serious about our women's team. We did not, as I mentioned earlier, condescend in coaching or training them. We also didn't cut corners with them. We tried to treat them as elite athletes. And I think that benefited us right out of the gate. And then I think that built on itself, because then a young kid coming in that we're recruiting, even though the coaches all feel that they're certainly an important part of the recruiting process, and clearly we are. That's not what closes a recruit. What closes a recruit is they come on campus, they talk to the players that are already there, and they get a sense of, are they going to fit in? And it's those players year after year after year after year that when an elite player came in, they were saying, you know what, I love it here. Please join us. Everything Anson tells me about you tells me that you're going to be an incredible fit here. You're going to fit into our culture. You're going to fit into this university. And so for year after year after year, the people that have made this recruiting conduit so effective for us are the players we've had. So I think we've done a lot of, very good things to make the players feel respected. but also to help them to their potential, and not just as players, but as human beings. And I think all these different things have put us in a rare position to have elite athletes on every roster we've coached. And we've been very effective in trying to guide these elite athletes to their dreams and goals. And it's been building on each team every single year, and that's put us in the position. There's no college coach out there that can take a collection of players without any talent and been able to have winning seasons. It's absolutely impossible. So I've built our success on these wonderful players, and they've been recruited by my wonderful players that would tell them, yep, you should come. I've loved it here. You will love it too. So please join us.
Now, you've had 21 national champions out of 31 NCAA women's soccer champions. You also had 2 AIAW champions, which was the organization Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women before the NCAA took over women. So you won 2/3 of the women's soccer championships. You've also coached 13 different players who have earned a combined 20 National Player of the Year awards. Do you have a favorite team or a favorite player?
Well, first of all, thank you for that, Dave. I appreciate that. Actually, we only won one AIAW championship. But it was important because back in those days, the NCAA didn't care about women's athletics. Mm-hmm. And what was really fortunate for us is we got our national championship approved by the AIAW the year before the NCAA took over all women's championships in a hostile takeover. So the only reason we became, I guess, NCAA eligible immediately was because of the AIAW. And I really want to thank those extraordinary visionary women with the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, who in a Detroit meeting, Chris Lidstone and I from Colorado College, flew in there together to lobby for a women's national championship. Basically the January after he had held an invitational national championship in Colorado Springs, which, by the way, we did not win. I think we may have finished 4th in that. Cortland State won. And they have this wonderful documentary where they drove across the country, basically with, car washes, and raised the money themselves. And they won the whole thing. So they were the first AIAW national champion. It wasn't an official championship, but that mission that Chris Lidstone sort of headed up by hosting the event gave us a reason to go in and speak to these extraordinary women. We went in there and made our pitch, and I still remember the pitch I made. I'm in there in front of these extraordinary, basically SWAs, senior women administrators at all these schools that were running their women's teams, and basically said, there is a parade coming, and we can be at the front of this parade. We can, grab the banners, and we can lead this. And I know we don't qualify for the NCAA national championship right now. If we use their criteria, we wouldn't qualify. We didn't have enough teams. And back then it wasn't Division I, II, and III. We didn't have enough teams. If we'd had Division I, II, and III, it would have been 5 or 6 teams in Division I, maybe 2 or 3 in Division II, and maybe 8 in Division III. There just weren't that many. And so please, allow us to get to the front of this parade, and let's lead them by giving them a national championship now. And the pitch wasn't much longer than that, is basically what I said. And then they said, well, do you mind allowing us to discuss this without you guys in the room? So we walked out of the room, and they brought us back in, and they said, yep, let's do it. And so these visionary women gave us an incredible jump start because, we hosted it. We hosted the next event. Chris Lidstone and Colorado College hosted the first one. The second one, and this is the first official one, was hosted in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And we wanted a national footprint. We wanted to do everything we could to support this wonderful game that we were all a part of. So we invited 12 teams in for the national championship, basically during the week. And we had, I think, Oregon was there, UCLA was there, Massachusetts was there, Central Florida was there. So you can look at this. So UCLA, basically the lower left-hand part of the country, Oregon, the upper left-hand part of the country, UMass from the upper right-hand part of the country, Central Florida from the lower right-hand part of the country. I think UMSL also came in from St. Louis. We literally tried to map the country because we were trying to sell this event to the United States. And they all came in, and we played this, sort of, single elim event. And all of a sudden, we emerged as the national champion. That we went on our football field, by the way, in a football stadium, because we needed 2 fields to have this event. We couldn't do it all on one field. So one of the field was the football stadium. The other field was obviously the soccer stadium. And here's what I loved. I mean, certainly the people with the AIW saw this and they embraced it. But then all of a sudden, my administration embraced it. We're in the football stadium. That's hallowed ground.
Yeah.
And how many, certainly back in the, gosh, you kidding me? In the early 80s, this is 1981. I mean, if a football coach saw a soccer ball bouncing on his field, the entire soccer staff back in those days would have been fired, and maybe one of them would have been shot at dawn. So all of a sudden, for our culture, our football coaches and our athletic directors and our people, our administrative staff to embrace this, we were off the races. And obviously winning that, and we certainly use that in recruiting. And then in a hostile takeover, the NCAA embraced every single AIAW women's sports because they didn't have a women's sport. And so we were sort of tucked into that. Now, some other teams remained in the AIAW, and I really respect them for that because they knew that these women are why this was so successful. But here's what the NCAA was going to do. They were going to pay for everything because that team that came from UCLA, they had to do a massive fundraiser to fly in. That team that came down from Amherst, Massachusetts, massive fundraiser. So basically, the advantage and the reason we selected to go with the NCAA is they would pay for everything now once the NCAA tournament began. And I knew that would be the best way to build our game. So even though I certainly credit these extraordinary female leaders that led us when the men weren't interested, what made sense to me that I knew would help us really promote this game was to go with the NCAA, which is why in '82, the next championship we won was an NCAA championship.
Okay. And great history. I did not know all of that history, even though you and I have worked together on projects before, but you didn't answer my question. So of all of your championship teams and of all of your 13 players who've won 20 national champions, and I know this is not fair, and I know you're going to say no, but do you have a favorite team or a favorite player? And so maybe you can say, no, but these really stick out.
You don't have to help me with this, Dave. I answer questions for a living. If I don't want to answer the question, I don't answer it. So you don't have to guide me through not answering a question. But I appreciate you being gentle with me. Yes, I do have a favorite team. In 2012, my wife was suffering from an extraordinarily terrifying disease. Basically, she was dying. And this is the first Final Four she had never attended. She was back at home. She was convalescing, and she wasn't there with me. And all of a sudden, Amber Brooks, an extraordinary leader on my women's team, came up to me and said, Anson, we want to play for Melissa. We want to play for your wife. And even now talking about it, it's hard for me to share the story without choking up a bit, because I thought that was just so wonderful. And by the way, it wasn't like the team we took to Southern California in 2012 was, a number 1 seed or a number one seed.
Right.
They were a number 2 seed. And so basically this team, wasn't supposed to win, but they wanted to play for my wife. And it was so cool. And all of a sudden, Julie Foudy, the color commentator for that event, is there in the stands, and she sees all these signs that all the UNC fans are holding. This one's for you, Melissa, because basically that's what the kids did. Is they took ankle tape, they wrapped their wrists in it, and every one of them wrote on their wrist, "This one's for you, Melissa." And those signs started appearing in the stadium. And Julie Foudy, who of course played for me on that '91 World Championship team, was talking about that. And then the camera would, pan the stadium, and you would see all these signs about playing for Melissa. And then, of course, they're panning the stadium and who's there, but Mia Hamm's in there, and some of the all-time greats have come to visit us. And who did we have to play in that first game? We had to play the number one seed. And they had an extraordinary team. And in golden goal, Crystal, I think maybe Amber even won the ball. Amber won the ball. I think gave it to maybe Katie Bowen, who found Crystal Dunn. Crystal Dunn is on a full run and starts to carve up some of the Stanford Central defense. And of course, now the next goal wins, because golden goal overtime, next goal wins. And so the left back moves over to take Crystal, leaves Kalia Ohai unmarked on the right side. Dunn plays a ball into her, and Ohai buries it in the lower left-hand corner, and we are off to the championship game, baby. And then we're playing Penn State, who took out our colleague in the ACC, Florida State, in the semi. And so we're playing a really good Penn State team. And all of a sudden, in the first couple of seconds of that game, Kalia Ohai smashes a ball in the back of the net, and we're up 1-0, and then bang, Penn State comes right back, and it's up and back, and we go into the half, it's tied 1-1. Of course, we're not a number one seed. Penn State was, Stanford was, and we just came fighting back and ended up winning the championship game 4-1. The other thing I loved about that championship is every single kid on that roster played. So we had all of the starters on the bench at the end of that game, and every single reserve that was dressed was in that match. So for all these reasons, we were a low seed. We won the national championship. We went through 3 or 4 number one seeds to get there, including BYU and Provo, which for me was wonderful because being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to go into Zion and take out, my church school, and then to go into that game so relaxed. So I knew in the press conference following the game against BYU, if we had lost, it would have been great. I would get to say for the rest of my life, there you go, girls. That's what happens from principle-centered living. We were beaten by the righteous, and I would have had no issue with it. So for me in that environment, I was so relaxed just because of who we were playing. I have huge admiration for my church culture, but also that university. And then to win the whole thing, win it for Melissa was just extraordinary. Obviously, I've got a lot of rings. I only wear one. This is the one I wear. This is the 2012 National Championship ring, because that team played for my sweet wife, Melissa, and I will never forget it.
Yeah, it's really too bad that you don't remember any details from that season, but you and I have known each other for more than 30 years now, and I was always impressed with how you could remember a particular play by a particular player, and not the Mia Hamm or the Christine Lilly or the players like that, but the person who didn't play that often but came in and had an exceptional game at a precise moment. You always remember those details. So it's one of the things that I appreciated about you. I want to talk about some of your well-known players, though.
Sure.
You've mentioned Mia. She was voted one of the two. I don't remember if she was ahead of Michelle Akers, but one of the 2 best women's soccer players in the 20th century. You've had some really, really good players. Which players stick out for you and why? And I'm not saying which are your favorites, because I know that's really going to be tough to do. But which are some of the players that stick out for you and why?
Sure. Well, let's talk about Mia, because here's what's interesting about Mia. She was not just extraordinary on the field. We had to build this game. And you build it all kinds of different ways. You certainly build it with your superstars like Mia. But you also build it with the way Mia helped us build it. She certainly built it with her game. And she built it along with Nike and Gatorade with her presence across the spectrum. So yes, when you watched her play, some of the stuff she did in the field would take your breath away. And that was a part of what built her image. But the other thing that built her image is how extraordinary she was with the media. And you know this because you do a lot of media events. When some players are asked a question, you can see them wrestling with whether or not they're going to answer it. And then you can see them avoid answering it. And I think one of the things that the press absolutely loved about Mia is when they asked her a question, she thought about it, and then she answered it. And her answer had depth and breadth. It wasn't a platitude. It wasn't, this was great, that was great, and no. She would look at the reporter, and the reporter would ask her about something that a lot of players would avoid answering, and she would answer it. And as a result, she became a media darling in the right way. She became a media darling because she was so honest with the media, and she wasn't afraid to show her vulnerabilities to the media. And then even though, media event after media event and reporter after reporter tried to put her on this pedestal, she did not allow them to put her on the pedestal. She spent the whole time talking about, Christina Lilly, and Julie Foudy and Michelle Akers and all these other women, because she wanted to build the game. And then she did things that are just unbelievable, especially in this era of, pay me the most, or that'll show your lack of respect for me. When we had a chance to have a women's pro league, the WSA could have paid Mia $500,000 a year and paid the rest of the national team players $40,000 a year, and they could have gotten away with it and had their league. Mia Hamm refused to get one dime more than the lowest player on the 1999 World Championship roster. So she had her salary set at that player's level. So all of a sudden, when you have this icon that not only is honest and charitable and vulnerable, and then let's face it, and if this comes across as sexist, I apologize, but this is the truth, absolutely beautiful and photogenic. And let's not pretend that that doesn't have value as you're promoting something. Of course it does. If you need to check on whether or not that's true, look at any advertisement and you'll see the same thing. So Mia is selling our game. And so every mother and father out there wants their kid to grow up and be Mia Hamm. And so when you add all these things together, she was perfect for us. And so she separates in that respect. Now, others that are basically also comparable in terms of ability on the field.
Before you do that, let me interrupt you because I want to give you my favorite Mia Hamm moment. And you introduced me to Mia, and I got to know her pretty well. And the thing that sticks out with me just goes along with what you were just saying. She was a college kid. She wasn't the greatest player in the world of women's soccer. I mean, she was, but that's not the way she reacted. That's not the way she interacted. When I came down there one time and you gave me a bag full of UNC gear to wear proudly, and I still have much of it. I was in the office the next day, and she comes over to me and she says, "Did Anson give you some gear?" And I said, "Yes, he did." And I told, you'd given me a t-shirt and you'd actually given me a nice winter coat that said UNC soccer on it, stuff like that. And she said, "Didn't he give you a jersey?" I said, "No." She goes, "Hang on a second." She runs over and there's a box of last year's jerseys. You had gotten replacements. So these were sitting there and I'm not sure what you were planning on doing with them. She starts digging through and she finds hers. And she says, "Here, I want you to have this." I mean, how many star athletes, not just good athletes, but star athletes, think of somebody else in that way where they wanted to make sure I was taken care of by giving me her jersey from last year? That, to me, that's my favorite Mia Hamm story. I've watched her play. She's wonderful. I agree with you. She's a beautiful girl. But that's the memory that sticks for me. And so we'll try and get her to watch this. And so, Mia, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, go on with some other players.
Yeah, no, but you've captured her. I mean, this is what made her extraordinarily special. And certainly in light of, watching all of these people on, current social media platforms, they're all hunting, fame. And I don't think too many of them are hunting it the right way sometimes. I mean, you're so right about her. She was so generous with all aspects of herself. And that's why she was so wonderfully ingratiating to so many different people across the spectrum. And she helped us build our game.
Yeah.
We were trying to build our game back then. And she did. She helped us build it. So that 99 World Championship, holy cow. We sold out large stadiums. We were making a statement for where our game could go. And so before we start to forget these pioneers, she is at the absolute top in all of those categories that separate her. Now, to get into the other players that also were extraordinary on the field, the argument for Michelle Akers is irrefutable. This is a player without a weakness. You can point to any player that's out there, and I can tell you what her weaknesses are. This is a player without a weakness. One of the best in the world in the air, one of the best in the world at scoring goals with her left or right foot, one of the best girls, in terms of decision making and ability to keep possession. There wasn't a quality she didn't have, and so she absolutely separates. And then in so many areas, Christine Lilly is up there as one of the best. But then you have to embrace the part of the game that people consider the most difficult. Christine Sinclair, the great Canadian that's scoring goal after goal after goal, that's going to eclipse or has eclipsed everyone. Abby Wambach, that's up there, making basically her ability in the air so iconic that she ended up catching Mia. So all these players up top in that respect that are so that separate themselves. And we could go into all kinds of players across the face of the earth. But obviously, since the U.S. has won more world championships than anyone else, I think you've got to start to look at the U.S. roster consistently. And you can go deep into that roster and find all kinds of players through time that have stood the test of it, from the great leaders to the great personalities in every single line. In goal, certainly with Hope Solo. And even though to some extent, people consider her disgraced in so many different areas, I don't. I mean, she did things in goal that I don't think anyone else has done while she was playing or before or since. And so there's an iconic position in a different role that has to be considered one of the best of all time. And this is not to take away from the other goalkeepers that have played before her or after her, or it's not to sort of, wipe clean her slate of indiscretions. It's not. But if we're discussing the greatest players, she has to be in that conversation. Yeah. And I have no issue embracing her in that conversation because she was extraordinarily brave. She was very good with her feet. She was an incredible competitor. So let's embrace her, and let's not, start to parse all these different people because their, social justice platform didn't shine as brightly as someone else's. So let's look at it in all kinds of different ways. And so, yes, I am embracing her. And I think too many people have dismissed her, and I refuse to. But I could go on forever. And we've had so many players, and obviously I'd be hard pressed to not, mine into my Tar Heel lineage, and that would show my prejudices, because there's certainly others out there right now that are extraordinary, including my kid that just won Player of the Year, that played for me and won a national championship back in the day, Lucy Bronze, who's playing for Manchester City in the FA Women's Super League. But even ones that have, struck out on the coaching levels, like Serena Vekman, who was the FIFA Coach of the Year that they voted on a couple days ago. So all of these great former Tar Heels that have done incredibly well. But for more balance, I think what you would need, honestly, Dave, is someone that's not affiliated with one collegiate program or another. So let me stop there, because there's certainly others outside of our family that you could make a wonderful case for.
And we could go another couple of hours talking about success that you have led. And I know you're a very humble guy, and so you would cut that short. It's just, if anybody is watching this or listening to us and doesn't believe that Anson is the best women's soccer coach in history, Google it, you'll find it. So I'm gonna, before you get a chance to refute that, I want to ask you a couple more questions. I've known you for more than 30 years. I have never seen you upset. Do you get mad?
Yeah.
You don't sound convincing.
Well, my favorite award at the UNC Women's Soccer Banquet is the Gift of Fury. The Gift of Fury is a line I took from a movie, The Great Santini. Santini was this Marine warrior in peacetime, and he's this frustrated warrior. It's a book written by Pat Conroy, basically about his father. The Great Santini was Pat Conroy's father. And Pat went to the Citadel, a military academy in South Carolina, and his father was Santini. And there's this part of the movie that I absolutely love where Santini is lying in bed with his wife one night, and he's trying to talk to her about the way he wants to raise his kids. And of course, she's heard this 1,000 times, so she's pretending like she's asleep. She's basically ignoring him. And he's pontificating on the way he wants to raise his kids. And he says something to the effect of, I would like my sons to have the gift of fury. I want them to gobble up the world. I want them to eat life before life eats them. And I absolutely love that story. And of course, the wife is pretending to be asleep. She's heard all this BS out of this frustrated warrior so often, she just doesn't even listen to him anymore. But I love that phrase, the gift of fury. That is an absolutely critical quality in contact sports. Because if you don't have the gift of fury, if you don't have the physical courage to lay your body on the line in contact sports, you're not going to be a great performer in it. And so we give out a Gift of Fury award annually at my banquet. And as everyone knows, and we give out MVP awards, and we give out the Kelly Muldoon Award for Character, which is in theory the top award in my banquet. The one I love best are the Gift of Fury award winners, because that's the way I've always looked at myself as a soccer player. I wasn't the most skillful guy in the world. I wasn't the fastest or the biggest. But I think whenever I played, I was the most furious. If there was a 50-50 ball between you and me, and you went after it, I was going to go after it too. And then I would be praying for some sort of horrific collision where your forehead hit mine, our noses met, our teeth met, where you would lose 6 teeth and I would lose 6. Our chests would meet, our kneecaps would meet. Basically, we would have a collision that I would hope that one of the two of us would possibly be mangled from for the rest of our lives. And I wanted to be the first one to get up while I was spitting out teeth. And I'd actually help you up if you had the capability after this collision. I think that's an incredible quality. It isn't anger. It's a form of anger. It's like chosen anger. It's almost like controlled anger. And who knows, maybe it's not. I have that quality. So yeah, I don't necessarily anger easily. And I can handle situations. I'm not afraid of anything. When I was young, I used to get in fights all the time, and I didn't win too many of them because I was always small for my age, but I always had an extraordinarily high pain threshold. And here's what I understood about getting in a fight when I was younger. Even if this guy had, beaten me nearly to death, the next time we collided, because, basically I was still alive, there was a kind of respect for the fact I wasn't dead yet. And it's something I've learned from. So no, I'm an eternal optimist. You're never going to see me down. Melissa knows the only time I get down is when my body's falling apart, and I hate it. And I'm at that stage now. I've got a left hip labrum tear. My left knee is deteriorating. I have 4 bulging discs from basically my violent life in sport. But yeah, I don't get angry that often.
All right, and I'll let you wrap up with this. I've had the pleasure of finding out that you, like I, are in the I Married Over My Head club. How is Melissa doing? And just talk about what's going on with your kids as well, and we'll wrap up with that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Melissa's doing great. She's still, fighting the issue that took her out in 2012. And back then it was kidney failure. And it was an autoimmune issue that she continues to fight, but she fights it now very effectively with a pill regimen that she's on regularly throughout the day to keep her alive. I hate doing this publicly, but I feel I have to. She's kept alive by Duke University, our bitter rival. I hate admitting this, but she worked at Duke for 33 years, retired an emeritus professor. And thanks to their extraordinary health system and the doctors over there, she's on a regimen right now that is a very expensive regimen that Duke is paying for very graciously, that I am forever thankful for. So I want to give Duke absolutely full credit for her. And we are enjoying our lives. And I'm one of a few people, Dave, that's thriving in the pandemic because I'm an introvert. I was built for a pandemic. So me and this pandemic are getting along famously. And, with the exception of the death that's out there and our near brush with authoritarianism, I'm loving everything about this pandemic. Yeah, Melissa and I are thriving. We miss our kids, but the best part of this pandemic is I had two kids, artists that live in Brooklyn. And because New York was hit first, I was so afraid looking at the numbers in New York, we convinced the two kids, my eldest, Michelle, and my youngest, Donovan, to come home. And they came home and we loved it. They came home and we started 2v2 basketball, 2v2 soccer, and pickleball, 2v2 pickleball. And I almost got a second chance at re-raising my kids because, of course, I had no time when I was, coaching the men, the women, and the full national team. I didn't spend enough time with them. Thank goodness for Melissa and my church because they're extraordinary people. But honestly, in my opinion, I did not spend the time with them I should have. And I've been given a reprieve in that respect. So they came back and they're doing very well. Michelle is a MacArthur Genius Award winner. She's one of the best rhythm tap dancers in the world.
Wow.
If you Google her, Michelle Dorrance, or her company, Dorrance Dance, you will see that she's at the top of her profession. Donovan, my son, is her musical director. He composes music. He plays multiple instruments, and he and Michelle are in Jacob's Pillow right now, which is in Western Massachusetts. It's an art community set up to basically promote dance. And she's up there right now with her company, and they're on their way back here. So we're going to see them soon for Christmas, but we loved having them during some of the pandemic. And then my middle daughter, Natalie, married a litigating attorney. She has our only grandchildren. They live in Greensboro. They bought a beautiful new home. And so I get to see Natalie and my three grandchildren on a regular basis. Finley is my eldest grandson. And then the twins, fraternal twins, Hunter is one of them, and Jackson is the other. They're just over 2 years old, so we get to see them regularly. And they are also thriving. And I appreciate you asking me that question, Dave, because the Dorrances are doing well. Thank you.
Good. Well, my best to Melissa and Anson. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I usually get to call you in early December to congratulate you on another national championship. Obviously, we didn't get to do that this year, but maybe in the spring. But it's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Thanks very much for joining us.
Dave, I always enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm so glad you're doing this. I know this is something that's going to take off because I think you are a true sports fanatic. That book you wrote for me back in the day still sits here. I should have had it sitting behind me because I know what's happening now on all these Zoom calls. You see all these guys that are writing books and they have their book sitting behind them on the bookshelf to advertise. And I should have been smart and I should have put your book right back there to show the world that you wrote a great book about the Tar Heels back in the day. And just so you're aware, Dave, I absolutely treasure it. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It's great to talk to you, man.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for listening to Sports Connections with David Smale. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the show from your favorite podcast platform. You can learn more about David Smale and his work by visiting davidsmalebooks.com. Don't forget to join us weekly for new episodes. Until next time.